There are so many things that I think all in all, the whole process of and going through it and connecting with other people who have done it too really connect you in this bond that other people in the world who have not gone through this adoption journey can't ever understand. Would you
Absolutely.
agree?
Yes, 100%. And I think it's just like a family, and I think when I meet other
Yeah.
adopted families, when I meet people who are adoptees, I just feel so much like instant love for them. And I try to not be weird about
Yes.
it, but I'm just like, I have this
No.
connection with you, I love you. Um, and it's beautiful.
Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast, your go-to guide through the beautiful, complex, and transformative journey of adoption. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through adoption consultant for over a decade, author of the Adoption Roadmap book, and your trusted guide. In each episode, we dive into real experiences, expert insights, and the raw, honest truths that you will need to navigate your journey. Whether you're just beginning, in the thick of it, or well past placement, you'll find support and community here to help you navigate this unique path with confidence and love. Adoption isn't all rainbows and butterflies. It is life-changing and worth every bit of effort. Let's learn, grow, and journey together on the Adoption Roadmap Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Adoption Roadmap Podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Gruenspan, and today we're joined by a dad of 4 whose family has been touched by adoption. Jeff Dunn's family building journey began in 2008, and together with his wife, Whitney, they've navigated the joys, the struggles, and the triumphs. Their path was forever changed when their son, Zach, was born with a rare genetic syndrome called Treacher Collins, which led them to make the courageous decision to expand their family through adoption. In 2019, they welcomed their son, William, and just 2 years later, welcomed their son, Quentin. Jeff is not only an adoptive father, but also the author of the children's book, A Buffalo Out of Water, a beautiful story about Wade, a water buffalo born in India and adopted by a family of American buffaloes. Through Wade's journey, Jeff hopes to provide a window into the adoption experience for both adoptees and children who are not adopted, fostering empathy and understanding. Jeff is a self-described book nerd, peanut butter enthusiast, and passionate storyteller. He's spent over 15 years in advertising, helping brands like Geico and Ancestry.com find their voice. But beyond his professional accomplishments, he's a mentor, a collaborator, and most importantly, a dad of 4 who brings enthusiasm and fun into everything he does. Let's listen in as Jeff shares his story and drops some knowledge bombs on us. Welcome, Jeff, to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast. How was that?
That was
Did
the
I
best
get
intro I've
everything
ever
in?
received.
Fantastic. So we're just going to start with our questions and conversation by having you walk us through the initial conversations you had with your wife about adoption. And just curious what the key factors were that led you both to pursue the path of adoption.
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to. I think my wife was kind of had more inspiration, I think, about that this is something that she felt like we needed to do, and that she felt like there were more kids in our family, and that were out there waiting for us and needed to be part of our family. So she was really gung ho about it. I was a little bit like, okay, like sounds good, like let's try this out. But my wife was definitely the driving force in the beginning.
I think that's pretty common. What were your hesitancies about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I just think I had never really considered it. I mean, I loved having kids and I loved being a dad, but I just had never really thought about going down the adoption route. So I just kind of had to, I think, wrap my mind around it a little bit. and just kind of be just open to the idea. And I want to always be supportive of my wife, and I feel like she's smarter than me, you know, and wiser. So I just always try to follow her lead, and but I think it just took me some time to like, okay, this is what we're doing. Like, what is it all going to entail? It was kind of that sort of thing. So yeah,
And I promise this is not a podcast about becoming the best husband to your wife or having a good marriage, but sounds like you're a very smart man in how you describe your wife. And I was wondering if it was more about the adoption part or adding a fourth child to your family.
yeah, probably at
Or was
both.
it a
I
third
think
child at that
it
time?
was a third child. Yeah, I think even when
It
we
was a
started
third
having
child.
kids, I was like kind of, wait a minute, like we're gonna do this now? And she was like, yeah, like this is the time we got to do it. And so I was like, okay, I guess so. Um, yeah, I think she just kind of had more of a sense of like the timing of when children are supposed to come into our family, and I'm just along for the ride, but it's a great ride. So
Well, good. I'm glad it was a great ride. And you also bring up a good point that y- y- I'm glad that you took the approach of just going along for the ride. And also there was a lot of naivete right there because there was so
sure.
much you didn't know. But if your wife wanted to do it, why not? So initially, and we'll talk about some of the things that you learned along the way, because I'm sure you've learned a lot now. But initially, you had two children already, Madison and Zach. How did you approach talking to them about adoption and the new roles they'd have as siblings?
Yeah, I think my experience was that it was harder for like adults to process our decision. Like I think the
Mm,
kids were just kind of like, great, we get another brother. And we're like, well, there's like this, it's adopt, it's like we're trying to explain like, that's fine, whatever, who cares? We're just excited that we're having another, we get to have another sibling. So they were, I think, just being kids are just more just open to things, I think, and more flexible.
yeah.
And so yeah, it was kind of pleasantly surprised. It didn't really require a lot of um, as much like explanation, I guess, as I thought there would need to be. They were just excited to have another sibling.
Well, I'm curious. First of all, at what point in your process did you approach this with your kids, knowing that it may or may not happen, or you might get matched and then it might fall through? Like, at what point did you tell your children, and how did you explain adoption to them?
Yeah, I think we told them in both cases once we had been matched,
Okay.
and we let them know that there was a chance that the baby would be placed or not placed, and that that was up to the birth mom, and we were like totally respectful of that decision. Um, but I think we just tried to describe it in kid-friendly terms that, there's going to be a baby that grows in another mommy's tummy, but then that baby is going to come live in our family.
Mm.
So, um, and they got it. They understood. They didn't. So, but yeah, I think they
Really?
also
They
could
just
kind
said they didn't have questions?
of.
Like, huh?
Yeah, they did. I mean, I guess I don't really remember. I don't
Okay.
remember them having questions or concerns about adoption versus like if we had had a child naturally or biologically. Um, I think
Hmm.
they were just kind of like, okay, that sounds good. So,
Kind of
yeah.
like you.
Yeah,
The
exactly. Like,
apple
well,
doesn't
okay,
fall so far.
sure.
Cool. And so I'm curious, when you told them after you were matched, was it a successful placement?
Yeah, so the first match that we had was not successful. So they did go
Okay.
through that, and they
How'd you
were
explain
they
that one? Yeah.
yeah, so we had I think they had just known through the whole process that there was a chance that the baby wouldn't be placed. The birth mom would decide to keep her baby. And yeah, so I think they just kind of saw us kind of processing all those emotions of like, we're happy that the birth mom made that choice. We're also disappointed because we were looking forward to welcoming a new child into our home. So I think they could kind of see us struggling with all of that. And I think they were sad, but they
Yeah.
were a little more, they kind of bounced back quicker from it than we did.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. As kids do, right?
Yes.
They are more resilient than we think. And I'd be curious, and maybe I should be asking your wife this, like if you were nervous about telling your children because you wanted to protect them, because I know I see that a lot. Like, yes, we're going through it, but our child's going through it, and we are trying to protect him and or them.
Yeah. I mean, that is probably a better question for my wife, but I think I don't really remember that. I don't think there was as much like angst about telling them. I think they were. I mean, we're obviously
Hmm.
sad, and it was hard news to break to them, and they were sad.
Yeah.
But I don't think they were processing it in quite the same way as we did as adults.
Sure. All right, so here you are going through this adoption process, going along for the ride with your wife because that's what she wanted to do. And hopefully she did a little research to know what she was
Oh
walking
yeah,
into.
big time,
But
big time.
okay, great. So I'm curious what some of your biggest hurdles were that you faced during the adoption process, or yours together, yours alone, and how did you like support each other throughout these hurdles?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing for the adoptive parents is just the uncertainty. You know, you're investing a lot emotionally into something, and it's, you're wanting to do something for your family, and anytime you're like awaiting the arrival of a new child, there's like a lot of preparation that needs to take place.
Hmm.
You're getting the clothes, you're making the nursery, you're moving, like we had already had two children, so we were moving bedrooms around, and so there's a lot of preparation, but in the back of your mind, you have that uncertainty of like, well, this might not happen. And so that can be
Yeah.
hard. And I think sometimes, um, you just can kind of read into things a little bit too much sometimes, like in the communications with the birth mother. Um, Sometimes you're like, oh, maybe we said something wrong, or maybe she's not liking us anymore, or maybe she's not going to, it's just always kind of playing with your mind. Um, and I think that's just hard. I think you just have to acknowledge that it's hard. Uncertainty is hard, and um,
Yeah.
just remember why you're doing it, and you're doing it for a good reason, and you want the best for the child. And I think you also have to accept that if the birth mom decides to parent the child, that's a great outcome too. So yeah, I think just being open, talking about it, telling each other how you're feeling, not holding it inside, um, and just
Yeah.
like accepting how each other are feeling, and not trying to be like, well, you shouldn't feel that way, or like tell them all the reasons why you shouldn't feel it. But it's like, yeah, you feel that way, and that's okay to feel that way. So yeah, those are just a few thoughts.
Do you remember, and how old are all your kids now?
Yeah, so 13, 11, 5, and 3.
Okay, so they're still young.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you first started learning about adoption? And did you go the agency route? Did you work with a consultant? Did you work what was the route that you went?
Yeah, we hired a consultant, and then this person kind of matched us with I think it was an agency. I can't remember all the terminology, but it was the first one was they matched us with a place in Kansas that yeah, helped us. So it was
Okay.
both were domestic adoptions.
Okay, so you worked with a consultant, and that's what I am as well. And for those of you who don't know, a consultant kind of is there to support, is really the one person in the whole adoption journey that is there to support and advocate for the adoptive parent, to hold the parent's hand, the hopeful parent's hand, and hopefully doing a lot of education along the way. At least that's what we do,
Yeah.
and guiding them to the right places to match with, helping you vet situations, and a lot more. But in hopes that you did get some of that education, was there anything that when you first started the adoption process you were surprised about or hesitant about? Maybe it was around substance exposure. Maybe it was around openness and like being a little nervous about that. Like, what were your fears and what were some of those things that you were like, oh, this is adoption?
Yeah. No, I think it's I would say the kind of the we had a really good consultant as well, which was really helpful. So I would definitely we had a great experience
Great.
working with consultants both times. It was the same person. Um, but I think just the different laws within different states and how some states make it easier to adopt than others. I think that was super helpful, and that was something that I'd never really thought about or knew about. So that was really educational. Um, I think I think the openness is a little bit hard to wrap your mind around at first because you kind of have this mental framework of like I'm the dad, you're the mom, you're the kids, and then we have like aunts and uncles and we have that kind of thing. But there's not like two people that are the father figure. There's not two people that are, at least I wasn't, I didn't grow up in a situation like that. So that definitely took me some time to kind of wrap my mind around. And I think it's perfectly okay to feel that
Yeah.
way. Um, but I also think just to be open to open adoption because there are so many great benefits for the child and for and for both sets of parents, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just say it's okay to feel that way, but then just try to stay open because it really is a beautiful thing to have that openness.
Yeah, for sure. But, and it is scary. I always tell people everybody starts the adoption process at a certain level, right? A certain level of comfort, a certain level of knowledge. And I think the best advice that I could give somebody is to just approach it with an open heart and open mind, because whatever your thoughts are about adoption or what it is, or the stories that you're telling yourself, um, many of which may be myths, um, you're going to learn so much along the way. And if you can just dive into that, to learning what it really means and who these people are that you're dealing with in your life. You had mentioned earlier there's so many scenarios that you can kind of play out in your head. I all the what if scenarios, right? I once bought my child a book when he was young. It was called The What If Monster. It's a great book. But we are our own what if monster, right?
Yeah.
And if you can just continue to have an open heart and an open mind and consider things from a different angle and learn different, learn as much as you can, then you start to soften and your criteria starts to broaden and you're not as scared as you once were. There's so much about adoption that until you dive in, you're scared about. And
Oh yeah.
it's easy to be scared. There's a lot that you're dealing with, a lot of dynamics here.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, I mean, just to build off of what you're saying, every adoption is different. So you can talk to somebody
Yeah.
and they'll tell you something, and you kind of have that in your mind, like, okay, this is this is the only reality. But then you talk to somebody else, so there's a whole spectrum of experiences. So I would agree
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Like after our families adopt, we have them come together at different points throughout the year. We have the new parents coming together and sharing their stories, and it's really cool to watch them listening to each other and connecting with certain parts of somebody's story and being amazed by other parts of their story, like, and maybe relieved on another part of somebody's story, because there are so many things that I think all in all, the whole process of and going through it and connecting with other people who have done it too really connect you in this bond that other people in the world who have not gone through this adoption journey can't ever understand. Would you
Absolutely.
agree?
Yes, 100%. And I think it's just like a family, you know. And I think when I meet other
Yeah.
adoptive families, when I meet people who are adoptees, I just feel so much like instant love for them. And I try to not be weird about
Yes.
it, but I'm just like, I have this connection
No.
with you, you know. I love you, um, and it's beautiful.
I love that. I mean, I may have been that person, or I might still be that person that at a playground, when I see like a transracial family, I automatically think they're an adopted family. And occasionally I have asked at times. Um, but I'm like, I kind of want to know if your family is like my family. I mean, it's just this genuine
Yeah.
curiosity and wanting to connect and bond with somebody. But
Yeah, I think
speaking
if
of,
oh yeah,
yeah,
I just think
go ahead.
if you're genuinely curious about someone else's family and you're coming from a place of from a good place, people can feel that. And I don't think I
Yeah.
mean, at least in my experience, I don't I'm happy to share about my family and what so anyway.
Hence why you're on this podcast, right? Well, speaking of unique bonds, tell us about the unique bonds you've built with each of your children and how their personalities have shaped your family dynamics. Like, how have your biological children navigated their adopted siblings, vice versa? Do they all have very different personalities? Tell us about those different bonds and dynamics in your family.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people, I always say like we're different, but we're very normal at the same time. Like we have different color skin and we have maybe different biology. Some of us we don't all share the same DNA, but at the same time, like as a family, the dynamic is just exactly what you would expect. Like there's fighting, there's um, you know, squabbles and teasing and oh, sorry. I'm sorry. One second.
Oh, let's see your dog. Your dog's
She's
having an
she's crazy. One
appearance.
second. Come here. She's a guard dog. She's a little dog, but
let's
she's
let's
has the
see her.
heart of a
Let's
warrior.
have a guest appearance.
Okay. She sees people
What
outside and
kind of
she
pup
just
is
loses her
she?
mind.
Oh, she looks like a little doodle, is she?
Yeah, she's a golden doodle. So she's feisty
That's
though.
what I
She is
have. I have a
feisty.
big version. Oh my
Oh, you
goodness.
do?
Well, the smaller they are, the feister they are. Yeah, I have a
Yeah.
big golden doodle.
All right. Once I'm just gonna put her somewhere where she can't make that
Okay.
noise.
All right. Speaking about unique bonds, tell us a little bit about your family dynamics and how, I mean, you have biological children and children that came to your family through adoption, and then you also have special needs thrown in there. So how do all these dynamics play with each other? And was it always really smooth? I mean, tell me about that.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, I think, yeah, I always tell people that there's things about our family that are different, but there's also things about our family that are just so normal. So yeah, we have adopted children. We have a special needs son. I think the biggest thing with the special needs son is he has some hearing aids that are very expensive, and a lot of times, when his little brothers are wrestling with him, they'll take his hearing aids off, and we've had them thrown across the room and all kinds of stuff like
Oh,
that. So I've had some stern talking tos about that, but yeah, I think we just try to navigate like celebrating the uniqueness that everybody has, but then also giving love and stability to each child as well. So not that we're doing it perfectly, but I think that's what we're striving for. And um, yeah, I
sure.
think it's a very normal family dynamic in the sense that there's disagreements, there's fights, there's teasing, like jealousy, just like you have in any family. Um, so that was something that I didn't totally realize before adopting, and I'd seen that in a few other adopted families, and I was like pleasantly surprised. But it's just, they're at the end of the day, they're your
Mm.
family, they're your kids, and you're raising them the best you can, and you're loving them as much as you can, and um, so yeah, it's great. It's messy
What
and
did you
it's not perfect,
expect
but it's
the
great.
dynamic to be?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I think sometimes yeah, I don't know. I think maybe it was like sometimes from the outside looking in, because there's an adopted family, it's like, well, that family must be different, or they must do things differently, or they must be like, um, I don't know, like kumbaya all the time, or they're like this holy, like angelic family. But yeah, it's just family life. It's awesome. It's messy. It's hard, but it's the best.
All right, so I want to dig into it a little bit more. I want to get
Yeah,
a little deeper than just a normal family. So
yeah.
tell me about each of your kids. Like you guys are your kids the same race as you, first of all of them the same race?
Um, my biological children are the same race as me and my wife. Yeah.
Clearly. What about your children through adoption?
And our children through adoption are both black.
Okay. So you might be a normal family, but there are dynamics there that play out, I'm
Sure.
sure. I'm sure your black children uh, understand that they look different from their biological siblings and parents. How has that played out, or what conversations have been had? Is it ever thrown out in fights? Is it ever like how does that come out? Either the adoption piece or the race piece within your family dynamics, and how has that changed your dynamics? Other than the fact that now you're a black family, other than that, how has it
Yeah,
changed?
no, I think so. Our oldest son, William, he's 5, our oldest adopted son. And then our younger son is 3, Quentin. So Quentin hasn't said anything about it yet, but William has started mentioning like how he has dark skin. He will when we watch movies or stuff, or when we tell him about somebody new that we met, he will start asking us what color is their skin? Are they brown or are they white?
Okay.
And he has said a few things which are hard to hear, but he'll say stuff like, he said a couple times that he wished he had white skin. Um, which is, yeah, it's you don't never want to hear that. Um, but we try to talk to him and understand why he would say that. And I don't think we got a great answer, but I think probably just because he sees, the other members of his family, his adoptive parents, who he just calls his parents, but they all
Right.
have white skin, and I think that will continue to be something that he has to navigate, and that's just a journey that we're on with him, and we want to support him as much as we can. And we want him to make sure that he knows that his skin is beautiful. That's why whenever would say something like that, we try to obviously like reinforce that, yeah, like your skin is beautiful, brown skin is beautiful, white skin, like all skins are beautiful, all skin colors. So yeah, just trying to support him and make sure that he feels proud of who he is.
Yeah. Are you so they're obviously still young, right?
Yeah.
It, and this isn't a whole podcast about transracial, but it's part of the dynamic, right? Are you and your wife prepared to go on that journey with them, with your family? I don't want to just single him out or either of your children out because they're black and
Yeah.
you're white. This is your family. You are now a black family in the eyes of black families. Typically
Yeah.
when there's biracial, whatever, you're considered a black family. Are you, at least from my experience and what I've heard and what I've learned, are you prepared? And if so, if not, how are you preparing to walk this journey with them?
No, it's a great question. And I think it's something, I think we feel a lot of responsibility, that
Yeah.
because that we've brought these 2 amazing boys into our family, like this, we are 100% committed. It doesn't mean that I
Yeah.
think to me, it's like, it's just having that constant openness and always understanding there's more to learn, and that we don't understand everything that he will experience or that he will feel. Um, but just trying to, gathering all the information that we can from people who have gone through these kind of experiences so that we are prepared that way,
Yeah.
but then also making space for him as an individual because, like we said,
Yeah.
no adoption is the same, no 2 people are the same, and everyone's going to process things differently. So be like, well, how is this feeling to you? And how can we support you? And I think you just have to have that mentality that, you know, we're here for you. We love you. We support you. Like, we're open to your reality. If you need to, I think one thing that I've heard a lot that I want to try to do my best to be open to is like, you may have to say some hard things to us, and we want to be open to that as well. Like, you may have pain from
Mm.
being adopted, and that's really hard for us to hear as your adopted parents, but we want to honor that, and we don't want to just shut you down and tell you not to feel that way. And so, like, yeah, so I think it's something that we're just going to have to take a day at a time, but we understand that's coming, and we are here for him and both of our adopted sons 100%.
Oh, Jeff, it has come. It's not coming. It has come.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, the making space, right? And it's not just making space knowing that, oh, they can talk to us about whatever they want. It's letting all of your children know that there is space for these hard conversations and these hard realities. And it's not, it's not something that just your adopted children will be, dealing with, but your other children as well, right? They're part of this unit. Um, how did you, or did you ask, have a conversation with your biological children, because they were a little bit older at that time, or at least old enough to understand what was going on, I think, right? Did you
Yeah.
talk to them at all about race, and that you might be adopting a child that's a different race than them, and ask them how they felt about that? Or how did you approach that piece? And I'm asking because I think these conversations here are so important. These are things people wonder about, and it's not talked about in this type of minute detail. So
Yeah.
I hope it's okay that I'm pushing a little bit, but I
No.
think these are the things people think about. Like, how do I tell? What do I say? When do I approach it? Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. Hey there, Adoption Roadmap fam. Are you ready to take the next step on your journey to parenthood? If so, head over to our website and take our quiz. It's called, Are You Ready to Adopt? It's not just about testing your knowledge. It's about making sure you're emotionally and practically prepared for the beautiful, complex journey of adoption. Let's make your dream of parenthood a reality. Go to rgadoptionconsulting.com and take the Are You Ready to Adopt quiz today. That's rgadoptionconsulting.com. The quiz is free, and it will let you know where you are in the process and if you're ready to jump into your adoption journey. How did you, or did you ask, have a conversation with your biological children, because they were a little bit older at that time, or at least old enough to understand what was going on, I think, right? Did you talk to them at all about race, and that you might be adopting a child that's a different race than them, and ask them how they felt about that? Or how did you approach that piece? And I'm asking because I think these conversations here are so important. These are things people wonder about, and it's not talked about in this type of minute detail. So I hope it's okay that I'm pushing a little bit, but I think these are the things people think about. Like, how do I tell? What do I say? When do I approach it?
Yeah. I mean, I can just speak from my experience. So I don't,
Sure. Of
but in
course.
my experience, our kids, it wasn't like a big deal. They were just kind of like, cool. Like that's awesome. Like we're excited. There was nothing, at least for our kids, they weren't like tripped up by it at all, or they didn't have like lots of questions or concerns. It was just kind of like another interesting, cool thing about their new brother that was coming to live in our family. So that's just, again, like I'm just speaking from my own experience. I can't speak for everybody.
Yeah.
But I would say,
How did you
I mean, at
approach
least
it, though? Did you just say,
yeah, I think we said, this our new baby will have like brown skin. Like their parents have brown skin, so they're gonna have brown skin too. Brown skin is
mm-hmm.
beautiful, and we're so lucky, to have this baby in our family, kind of stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
but our kids were just like, great, that sounds awesome. They weren't, like I said, they weren't. I think like an adult would be like, whoa, like what are you doing? Like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And
Mm-hmm.
I think for kids they were just a lot more just accepting, and just kind of like two thumbs up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of, I'm a white woman. I'm a single mom. I adopted a son who is Mexican. And nobody ever told me to do any research. I don't know. It didn't. Sometimes I feel like when you go in somewhat ignorant, I don't know if that's the right word, that they say ignorant is bliss. And sometimes I believe that. I have certainly, I'm the type of person that I've certainly jumped in with, every part of my being to learn as much as I can, to do all the things, exposure, friends, mirrors, all of it. And I was open to that, right? Of course, but I didn't do it preemptively. And I didn't really think about, okay, what are these types of conversations I'm going to need to have? What are the experiences my child might have that I'm not having? And I don't think one way is better than the other to kind of think through all of that beforehand. I think a lot of times when we're faced with these things, it really allows us to dig deeper, as long as you're the type of person that will do the work when you're faced with it or as it's coming. I'm just rambling, but any thoughts coming up for you?
Yeah, no, I think, well, I'm not trying to, I think my wife and I are people who have always, we just have always loved diversity and like learning about other cultures, other people.
Yeah.
I think I think especially if you're adopting transracially, I think it's just really important to make sure that you are open to that and that you celebrate that and you're not trying to, I'm not like assimilate, a child into a different culture. Like, um, so that's something that my wife and I really try to do is, yeah, just not just it's understanding like this is the culture that you've been adopted into, but we also celebrate your birth culture as well. Like, there's room for both, and
Right.
so however you want it, like to our sons, like however you guys want to do that, we support you and we celebrate like every part of you, and we're not trying to like close off one part. So
Yeah.
yeah.
One thing I learned, and that stuck with me, right, as I go through this adoption journey, which I'm still on, right? We all are. I take out little nuggets, golden nuggets, I call them, from all the things that I learned, the conferences that I attend, the conversations I've had. And one thing I remember learning early on is not to single out my son, talking to him like, oh, because you are Mexican, we're going to do this for you. And what do you want to do? It's our family, right? This is our family. We're doing this because this is our family, not because of you, because this is our family unit.
Yeah.
And I want to bring that up because I thought it really resonated with me. Like, if you are in a transracial family, saying, oh, today we're going to celebrate this because this is who our family is,
Right.
instead of singling out that single person. So I'm curious, what are some of the things that you have done to honor your son's birth histories and cultural backgrounds while, fostering a sense of belonging in your family?
That's a great question. Well, I can think of one example was where we live in Richmond, Virginia. There's I think it's like an African American festival every year, that we'll go down to and and take part in. My wife has been lucky enough to travel to Africa um,
Mm,
a few times, and actually, both of his parents are native Africans that came to the U.S. So, just
very cool.
having pictures from Africa, reading books from Africa written by African authors. Um, they're still young and they're still kind of, um, dipping their toes into culture. But I think as they grow up, like giving them other opportunities, like mirrors, like you say,
Mm-hmm.
helping them. We live by DC, close to Washington DC. We've gone up to the African American History Museum multiple times. But yeah, I think it's like you said, it's kind of finding that balance between like uh, celebrating their culture without feeling like you're singling them out and
Yeah.
like that this is like our family, this is what we do. Um, so I think that's a great point that you bring up, and definitely a great thing for all transracial adoptive families to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So
Just one of those lessons that I continue to learn. Have you
yeah.
had any surprising lessons that you've learned about yourself as a parent?
Um, I guess this is going to kind of sound like cheesy, I guess, but like just being like with an adoptive, when you're in an adoptive situation, just like the love that you feel, like I feel the same love for all of my children. Like I don't, it's not like I have to flip a switch when I'm parenting or loving
Hmm.
my adoptive child versus like a biological child. So I think that's something that, I think for men, maybe for women too, but just as you're going
Hmm.
into like an adoption possibility or situation is just that you will feel so much love for your child, whether they're adopted or
Yeah,
whether they're biological.
for sure. I love that you said that. And I'm guessing that might be something that you were worried about. But if not you, yeah, a lot of men, I think, especially men, have this worry of if it's not my own DNA, will I love this child as much? Or have
Yeah,
a
exactly.
need for their child to have their DNA.
Yeah,
I
exactly. And so I think it's one of those things where it's interesting because our son that has special needs, it's kind of that same thing where it's like when he's in our house, he's Zach, and like we don't think about his syndrome or anything like that. In the same way that when our family's together in our home, we don't think about these are the natural, biological kids, these are the adopted kids. But then it's like when you go out in public
Mhm.
and people encounter you for the first time,
Right.
you're like, oh, that's right. Okay, there is something, different. Um, but yeah, I think that was something that, going into the adoption process, I would think a lot of adoptive parents crosses their mind is like, will I feel a connection with this child? Will I love this
Mhm.
child? And in my experience, the answer is like 1,000% yes, you will. So
Resounding yes, you will. I remember when I was going through the process, somebody asked me, and I had gone through a fertility journey first, and somebody said to me, "Are you more interested in becoming a parent, being a mom, or being pregnant?" And I was like, "Well, I want to be a mom." And they said, "So it doesn't matter how you get there.
hmm,
You'll love your child just the same." And
yeah,
it's true.
yeah,
It's
it's
true.
beautiful. It's beautiful. It's awesome.
Can you tell us a little bit about Zach's syndrome? And yeah, let's just talk. What's it called again? And how does it? What is it?
Yeah, it's called Treacher Collins syndrome. It's the
Treacher
syndrome.
Collins.
If you know the book Wonder, or if you've seen that movie before, the author of that book had met a little boy in New York that had this syndrome, and that was the inspiration for the character Augie in that book. But it's a craniofacial syndrome. So essentially, when the baby's in the womb, the bones in their face don't form all the way, and
Mm,
so it affects appearance, vision, speech. Um, Eating, drinking, sleeping. It's not intellectual. There's no intellectual
mm,
disability, um, but there are a lot of hard physical challenges that come with it. And so just
hmm.
yeah, so that's been a journey in and of itself, and that's what I think you said in the intro. That's what kind of led us to pursue the adoption route. But yeah, that's a whole nother podcast, but that's been an amazing experience for our family as well to have Zach in our family. So yeah, it's
Is that
awesome.
genetic?
It is genetic in our case. Sometimes it's
Okay.
not, but in our
Hmm.
case, we found out that we are carriers for it.
Well, I want to give a shout out to my friend and movie producer Todd Lieberman, who produced that movie. So it was that's just kind of a little fun fact. Um,
Yeah,
but I'm
that's a big
sure
fun fact.
also, it is a big fun fact. I'm also thinking that, having Zach in your life with something that he has that's different from the rest of your family, right? Also plays into your family dynamic story, right? So you have a biological child who is typical, right? Quote unquote typical
Sure.
biological white child that looks like the rest of your family. You have a child with special needs who might feel different in that way. And then you have these children who were adopted and transracially, and they might feel a certain way about that. And yet that makes your whole family dynamic, which is beautiful.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because our daughter, who is the quote unquote typical one, sometimes she has feelings of like, well, I'm not special. Like, there's nothing
Right.
special about me. And so we're like, oh, yeah, that's
Right.
true. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I think I mean, parenting is tough for it's just, it's hard. It's amazing. I love it.
Right.
It's super hard, I think, for just in general. So I think you just have to, um, it's a process. It's an ongoing adventure. But it's amazing.
100%.
It's the hardest thing in the world, but it's also the best thing in the world.
And I just want to back up for a second and call out the fact that I'm not always so eloquent in my words, and typical probably isn't the best choice of words that I could have used there. I just couldn't think of what I was trying to say
Yeah.
to prove a point. And I'm not trying to say that any of your other children are not typical. But for purposes of that conversation, that's just what popped into my mind. So
Yeah.
I apologize
Okay.
if that was not a good choice of words.
No, I know what you
um,
meant.
Thank you. So let's
Thank
talk
you.
about a buffalo out of water. Speaking of typical, not typical, having differences, you wrote this amazing book with this amazing illustrations that I have marked right now because I want to read a part of it. But it's called A Buffalo Out of Water, um, which dives into themes of belonging and identity. So, what inspired, as if I don't know
Nice.
the answer, what inspired the character of Wade, who is the main character in A Buffalo Out of Water, and how did your family's experiences inform his journey in the story?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I wish I had like a very tidy, linear way to say this, but I actually just always wanted to write a children's book. I'm a creative person. I love writing, and one day I just had an idea about a water buffalo who went to live with a family of American buffaloes. I wasn't even thinking in terms of adoption at that point. I just was like, that could be just kind of a cool story for
Oh,
kids. But then as I was thinking about it more,
mm-hmm.
I was like, the kind of the light bulb. I mean, like in retrospect, it's like, oh yeah, of course. um, but yeah, I just was like, well, this could actually be a cool, way to kind of introduce kids to what adoption is. Um, and so I was like, well, yeah, that would be awesome because it would be really a fun, like creative project, but then also have like a lot of personal meaning. So I was like, this is going to be amazing. Um, so I was excited. I launched into it, and I think as I got into it, I was like, well, um, this can't just be like a typical kids book, like a fun, I was like, this actually needs to be a little bit more like serious in tone. Like it can still have some fun elements and fun illustrations and fun characters, but I didn't want to, make light of what adoption is because it's, as we know, it's like
Mm-hmm.
a complex thing. And I wanted to do my best to honor that, like make it in a way that's accessible for kids to understand a little bit of like what it feels like to be adopted, not like in any
Yeah.
great depth, but like, oh yeah, like this is what adoption is. I mean, I kind of wanted kids to just take away like this is a fun story, but it's also I understand now a little bit of like what adoption is and maybe a little bit of like what it could feel like to be adopted, so that if I meet someone who's adopted, I at least have a little bit more perspective.
Yeah. I love that. I can't believe that the thought of writing a children, this is your first children's book, right?
Yeah.
So that the theme came before even thinking about making it about adoption. That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, but I want to read a part of it because I think you hit on some really good themes in adoption in this book. So I'm going to just read a little bit, if that's okay,
Yeah, sure.
of this beautiful book. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see some of the illustrations I'm seeing. But he said Wade loved his family, but being adopted wasn't easy. He looked different than his parents and siblings. He had black hair. They had brown fur. He had long horns. They had short horns. Once he brought a picture of his family to school. Ava was curious why he lived with American buffaloes and asked who his real family was. It made him feel that since he looked different than his family, he wasn't really related to them. When grown-ups found out he was adopted, they would tell him he was lucky. It made him feel like his parents had done him a favor by letting him be a part of their family. It made him feel that he always had to be extra good to pay them back. I mean, lucky, real, different. I mean, I have chills because they're such important themes in the adoption world. I don't know if people can see that, but it's a beautiful book.
Thank you.
Some really important themes. And what were your, how did you figure out what you wanted to talk about in throughout the book? Or did it just kind of come to you as you were writing?
No, it didn't come to me. It was, I wish it would have. But no, I really did. I wanted to really like dig into it and think like hard about like, what are some common things that adoptive kids feel? So you can do research online. Obviously, I also wanted to have conversations with adult adoptees, like what experiences did you have? So try to do as much research as I could. And then also keep in mind, the audience here are kids. So how do we, like, which ones do we choose that would be like a kid could easily like, okay, I understand why that would feel a certain kind of way. Like it's not like we're asking kids to dive like super deep into the psychology. It's more just how can we just in a really brief, accessible way help them understand a little bit of what this is all about.
Make it relatable.
Yeah, relatable is a great word.
Did you read it to your kids? Did you read it to your kids before publishing it or before giving that final version to your publisher?
Yeah, I did. They were very instrumental in, especially from a visual standpoint. I had a lot of different character treatments from different illustrators. And then even when we picked the illustrator who is awesome, who has become like a great friend of mine, just like, how do we make this appealing to a child, from a visual standpoint? So that was really fun to have them involved in it. And I think especially William could see the parallels, and I think some of the ideas like sunk in, and he could see, the family pictures on the wall. And we're grateful. This is again my wife's idea because like I said, she's smarter and wiser than I am, and I mean that sincerely. But she, I'm really grateful that William has another sibling and Quentin has another sibling in our family that look like they do. So, but yeah, I think I think William definitely connected with it, and I hope that as he gets older, it will sink in even more and be a positive thing for him. So.
Well, I love it. And I want people to go out and, if you're looking for a good children's book about adoption, please go out and get Buffalo Out of Water by Jeff Dunn.
Well, thank you.
A Buffalo Out of Water by Jeff Dunn.
Yeah. And I think if I could just add one thing is that I think sometimes people, when I tell them about this project, they'll say, well, I'm not adopted, or I don't know anyone who's adopted. But I think it's equally beneficial to someone who is not adopted because it gives, like I said, not that it's a full, I'm not running the whole gamut of what adoption is, but I think it's good for kids to see different family situations and just gain empathy for, they can understand, that's what if I see an adopted family, like, that's cool. Like, I know what that is. That's not anything scary or weird. So that would be my hope. Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I just want to mention, and I'll put in the show notes as well, that we previously had another adoption children's book author who's an adoptee, Allison Olson, on the podcast, who also has a couple books that are great for children and also who are adopted and also other families. So you'll have to check her out too, and we'll link both of you guys in the show notes. Yeah. So Wade's story highlights the importance of belonging. What advice do you have for adoptive families trying to honor their children's adoption stories while making them feel fully included?
I mean, that's such a good question. I think it's something that we're still we're still working on, and I mean, I think it's like I said, I think we kind of talked about this earlier, but I think just being open as an adoptive parent is so important. Um, Open to however your child processes their adoption, um, and supporting them in the way that they feel about it and what they need from you. Um,
Yeah.
and just having an open mindset also about there's always more to learn. Like, I think there's a quote that I really like that says, it's what you learn after you know it all that really matters. So, which I think is just trying to say, like,
Oh,
you you can't ever have this mentality like I've got it all figured out. And so just feeling like I want to be open. There's always
can we
more to
say
learn.
that again for the people in the back of the room? You never have it always figured out.
Yeah, so just being humble, and it's not about you as the parent. It's about supporting your child. That's what I think, and that's what I always try to kind of reset back to is this is not about me. This is about how can I support my child.
This is not about me. It's about how I can support my child. Thank you for saying that. It's something that I always bring up to our families after they adopt and telling them that while your journey thus far may have been about you becoming a parent, especially if they're new parents, now the journey shifts and it's about
Hmm.
you becoming the best parent you can to your child who you brought in through adoption. So I think that's a really important golden nugget there. Do you have any other projects on the horizon that you're thinking about? Any other children's books?
Yes, I do. It's a huge passion of mine, and
Woo!
so I've written this first book for my two youngest sons, but then I have some books in mind for Zach, and then one for my daughter Madison, and then we're just gonna keep rolling from there. But
Ah,
I really love it. Yeah, it's super fun. So,
oh, I can't wait. You'll have to keep us updated so we can share it.
oh, thanks. Yeah, I would love. Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Is there an overall piece of advice that you would like to leave hopeful adoptive parents who are either thinking about adoption or on their journey right now with?
Um, yeah, I think I've already kind of said it. But I think for hopeful adoptive parents, I would just say hang in there. I know it can be it can be a hard road. Um, so
Yeah,
I would just be gentle to yourself, and um, uh, it can be tough. So hang in there.
for sure. I'm going to end with a couple rapid, quick fire questions. First of which is name a person or organization who has impacted your life as it relates to adoption.
Yeah, this might
You want
be
to
a little
shout
out
them
of the
out?
box, but I don't, there's a TV show called Relative Race that's about reuniting families, adoptive families, that I've really enjoyed. It's adult adoptees that are reuniting with their birth families. It's very moving. It's moved us to tears many times, but it's a fun show. It's called Relative Race.
Wow, what network is that on?
It's on BYU TV, so it's I guess Brigham Young University television. It's free, so you can stream it for free, but I would highly recommend it. I think it's really fun. It's for hopeful adoptive parents or um, people that are already on the adoption journey. It's really I really enjoy it. We've really enjoyed watching it.
Ah, I love that.
Yeah,
Okay, I've never heard of that.
yeah.
So as a sports fan, who is your favorite athlete of all time and why?
Oh my gosh. Um, I'm gonna go with Barry Sanders. I really liked him because he was so talented and amazing what he could do on the football field, but he was also just the most humble superstar I've ever seen. Like he would score the touchdown, then just kind of run back to the sideline. So I always admired him, not, for his athletic ability, but then also for his humility.
What's your favorite family activity on the weekends?
Ooh, um, that's a good question. There's so many. I'm a big family guy. Um, I like anything outside. So I like whether it's like paddleboarding on the water, swimming, hiking, playing sports, going for a walk. Just being outside with the kids is super fun. Um, so yeah.
All right, I'm going to tap into your advertising career. What's one creative idea or slogan you're most proud of from your advertising career?
Um, oh, well, one time we did a billboard for a car dealership, and their whole thing was about like they don't twist people's arms, like they're like a friendly car dealer. So we made this billboard that had kind of like a scoreboard on it. So there was like the LED, and it just had arms twisted on over the top of it, and the scoreboard was always a zero. So that was kind of the joke, is that it would never be updated. um, but that was fun to work on. It was actually, I had to do a lot of problem solving to figure out how to make that work with a very small budget, but that was fun to work on.
Describe adoption in 3 words.
Okay. I would say love, pain, and beauty.
Remember, the adoption journey is one of belief, love, and transformation. Whether you're just beginning or well along the adoption roadmap, each step you take weaves a narrative of connection and hope. Continue moving forward, stay curious, nurture the love in your heart, and know you're never alone in this lifelong adoption journey. Jeff, thank you so much. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast. Your feedback helps us grow and also helps others discover the valuable insights and all these golden nuggets shared here. Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you, listeners, for being part of this amazing community. Bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.